Really a burglar in there only to take stuff. I would expect to see signs of theft, signs of burglary, not a staged crime.
You'd find real evidence of a break-in, not some carefully staged scene. And right now, somewhere out there, a Bitcoin wallet is just sitting. It has got an address and a slot for the cash, but that balance reads 0. It has stayed at 0 from the very second it was born. 2 deadlines passed, and 58 days of a family's absolute agony went by before 8 top FBI agents all reached the same dark conclusion. This family stood in front of the cameras, begging to pay whatever it took. The whole world stared at that wallet, but the numbers never budged. This is what 8 veteran lawmen, guys who spent their whole lives hunting kidnappers and digging through homicide scenes, finally figured out. Their final determination is what we are looking at here. This ain't just some wild guess or internet rumor. It's a cold, hard verdict. They built this case stone by stone, using the proof that was staring everyone in the face before that first clock even ran out. Long before a single soul dared to whisper it, the truth was already screaming this was never about the money. Here is what the pros say happened from the very first second. We are going to start right where every other story usually drops the ball. We are talking 8 heavy hitters, former FBI special agents, and a retired homicide detective from down in Pima County. A retired SWAT commander and a former state trooper who specializes in cold cases have both put their reputations on the line here. These guys didn't hide behind anonymous sources. They used their real names in real interviews, documented for everyone to see. Not a single one of them thinks this was a legitimate kidnapping for cash, at least not in any way that actually makes sense. Harry Trombitis, an old-school FBI agent, told the press that the idea of a ransom motive was looking thinner by the hour. There is just too many moving parts, Trombitis noted. There are too many ways for a criminal to slip up and get caught. Retired FBI agent Andrew Bringwell told Newsweek the evidence points straight toward an abduction that spiraled out of control fast. It was a total disaster right at the moment of the snatch, not some professional ransom job carried out to the end. Kurt Daub, a retired homicide detective, told Parade that this was a planned snatch, not just some random act of violence. He described a tight operation with 2 to 4 people, pre-planned and watched closely, with one specific person in their crosshairs. Morgan Wright, who spent 18 years as a detective, went on camera to say, "This whole investigation needs a radical shift." He is convinced it is time to stop calling this a missing persons case. He used a much darker term, a nobody homicide. She tucked herself in that night, just like always, back home with her family, maybe feeling her 84 years a bit more than usual. She drifts off to sleep, and maybe she didn't click the lock. That is the kind of small opening a targeted predator waits for. Look, back when I was kicking indoors with the tactical team, I knew one thing: the guys talking now ain't just bored bloggers. They aren't some internet theorists chasing ghosts. These are men who have worked federal snatch cases and sat across the table from monsters. They have looked real kidnappers in the eye, and they understand how this ugly business works from the inside out. When a guy like Harry Trombitis says the ransom angle is fading, he is saying it because he has seen 100 cases just like it. When Andrew Bringwell compares this to that 1991 Alabama kidnapping, he is talking about a case he worked with his own hands. That was a job that started with a ransom note and ended with a body in the ground before a single dollar ever moved. He ain't just guessing from the sidelines. He is matching the patterns against the horrors he has lived through in his own career. Kurt Daub spent his entire life working the same Pima County streets where this happened, and he knows how to read the wreckage. When he says 2 to 4 people were in on this kidnapping, he isn't just throwing darts at a board. He is reading a crime scene in the same dirt he has walked for decades. And when men like that start saying the same thing, when they go public with their names on the line, it ain't some fringe theory anymore. It is a professional consensus of the highest order. The real question we are facing today isn't about whether these experts are right. The real question is, why are they so sure? Why do 8 veteran law enforcement pros look at the same facts the rest of us see and come away with something so different? They stare at those ransom notes, the empty Bitcoin wallet, and those ticking deadlines, and they conclude it was all just a show. The answer starts with knowing how a real ransom job works and seeing exactly why this mess doesn't fit the mold. A legitimate kidnapping for ransom, the kind run by people who actually know the game, follows a very specific, cold logic. That logic is brutal and practical, and it needs every single gear in the machine to turn perfectly for it to work. You have to keep the victim breathing, not because you are nice, but because a corpse doesn't give you any leverage at all. You can't swap a dead body for a suitcase of cash. The second that victim stops breathing, the whole damn plan just falls apart. There is nothing left to trade, no deal to close, and zero ways to get paid without handing over the very evidence that will bury you. You would be handing the cops a one-way ticket to death row. A pro operation treats the victim like a bank vault. Guarding the vault ain't optional, it's the only thing that matters. You gotta control the talk, or you got nothing. You don't hand over proof of life because you give a damn about a family's grief. You do it because that proof is the only thing that actually turns a desperate ransom demand into a done deal. Without it, nobody in their right mind is gonna send a dime. Without that proof, the deadline's just words. Without it, there ain't no deal. The whole dirty transaction's gotta be something you can actually pull off. Even with crypto, even with Bitcoin, which some lowlifes think is a ghost trail, the actual guts of taking and holding that cash is a trap. Stashing and cleaning that money without being seen takes real work. There are tech firms out there watching every digital wallet move in real time. The law's got tools that map every digital dollar. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, working with blockchain bloodhounds, sees things you wouldn't believe. They've busted crews way sharper than some amateur sending a single Bitcoin address to a local television station. It's almost sad. The idea that Bitcoin makes a ransom vanish into thin air is just a flat-out lie. One forensics expert called it a total fairy tale for the desperate. Every Bitcoin trade is carved into a public ledger. Every move's a beacon. Every wallet's got a history that never goes away. And you gotta have an exit. If you snatch someone and take the cash, you're now sitting on a witness who can sink you. Someone who can point a finger, describe that basement, and walk the feds right to your front door. It's a ticking clock for everyone involved. Bringing the victim back or deciding to end it, that's the most lethal heartbeat of the whole job. That's when things usually go to hell. You need a plan for the after. Actual ransom snatches in the United States, they're becoming a ghost story. They just don't happen much anymore. That's because pulling all those moving parts off at once is damn near impossible. Harry Trombas told Yahoo News the same thing: the math just don't work. Kidnapping for money has dried up over the years. The gear, the hideout, the constant lies you gotta manage. It's too much weight for most to carry. The money trail and the getaway plan are just way beyond what most street-level thugs can handle. It's a specialized kind of nightmare. Andrew Bringwell, looking back at his years in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, saw a dark pattern in this case that felt way too familiar. He told Newsweek that the Nancy Guthrie case felt like a ghost of the 1991 Carrie Lawson snatching, a tragedy on repeat. Carrie was a young lawyer in Alabama until a guy named Jerry Bland took her. He thought he was going to play the ransom game, too. Back then, the plan looked like it was actually working at first. There were calls, there were demands, there was a reason to hope. They expected a payday. But before the cash could even change hands, Bland murdered Carrie and dumped her body like it was nothing. He ended his own life. The cops closed the file, but the money never moved. And they never did find where he put poor Carrie. Bringwell didn't mince words. He thinks this case, like Carrie's, started as a textbook kidnapping, a simple plan for some easy money. It started in one place, with one goal, but it ended up somewhere entirely different, somewhere dark, where the light don't reach. All because the victim didn't even make it past the first move. Just sit with that for a second. Let that reality sink into your skin. Think about what it takes to pull this off, and then imagine what happens when the only thing keeping the victim alive just vanishes. Now, let's look at the actual facts from that night in Tucson, Arizona, January 31st, 2026, a night where everything went wrong. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old. Her back was so shot that just hobbling out to grab the mail was a struggle for her. Her heart was failing. She relied on a pacemaker and a handful of pills that the Pima County Sheriff and her doctor said she needed. Sheriff Chris Nanos made it clear those meds were her lifeline. Missing a single dose wasn't just a headache, it was a death sentence. The sheriff called it potentially fatal. The last time anyone saw Nancy alive was the evening of January 31st. The sun went down on her forever. Her son-in-law pulled up to her place in the Catalina foothills and dropped her off just before 10 o'clock at night. A quiet neighborhood. That garage door shut at 9:50 p.m., and that's when the real clock, the one this case is actually about, started its countdown. This whole mess has always been about that ticking clock, and what the cops told Columbia Broadcasting System News is enough to make your blood cold. At 1:47 in the morning on February 1st, Nancy's doorbell camera just cut out. Someone reached out and pulled the plug. Then, at 2:28 a.m., the app for Nancy's pacemaker lost its link to her phone. The signal just drifted away into the dark. 41 minutes, that's the whole window. The camera goes black, and 41 minutes later, the machine keeping her heart beating goes silent. The literal pulse of an 84-year-old woman just stops. Think about what that disconnection actually means when you're all alone in the dark. In a snatching, that lost signal means one of three terrible things. Either someone ripped that phone out of Nancy's reach, or she was dragged so far away that the signal couldn't find her, or Nancy's heart just stopped sending any pulse worth hearing. Any way you slice it, the whole ransom idea falls apart right there. You can't haggle over a woman whose heart monitor went dead. How do you negotiate for someone whose internal machinery went dark at 2 in the morning? You can't show proof of life when the life's gone. You lost the only thread that told you she was still breathing. That 2:28 a.m. timestamp. That's when the ransom theory died. That theory died right then, not weeks later, not on day 58 with an empty wallet. It died while her family slept, before the world even knew. When it finally went down, the whole engine, a ransom job, depends on just went dead silent. All the stuff that followed those notes, that digital wallet, and those ticking clocks was just layered over a hollow quiet. And in this game, silence means the deal is dead. The deal was never going to happen. The whole damn world was staring at that Bitcoin wallet. Even TMZ got their hands on the first note. That note had a specific crypto address scrawled on it. TMZ checked it out, confirmed it was the real deal, and started tracking it live. They were asking for millions of dollars in Bitcoin. The first clock was set to run out at 5 p.m. on Thursday, February 5th. A backup deadline, a safety net, was baked right into the same message. Monday, February 9th, the Guthrie family took to Instagram, desperate. Savannah, along with her siblings Cameron and Annie, spoke right to the monsters who took their mom. "We got your message," they said. "We hear you. We're begging you now. Just bring our mother back to us so we can hold her again. She is everything to us, and we have got the money. We are doing everything humanly possible. We are ready to talk." But the thing is, those words were a public promise to pay, and millions of people were watching every single move they made. That first deadline came and went. The wallet stayed at 0. The second one passed too. Still nothing. Just a big empty 0. A whole month into the hunt, and still 0. 58 days in, they were still watching that crypto wallet like hawks, waiting for a sign. That wallet tied to the ransom never saw a single cent. It just sat there, cold and empty, 0. There is one thing the ransom theory just cannot explain. If the bastards who grabbed Nancy Guthrie really wanted a payday, why did they never give the family a real way to hand over the cash? Not one shred of proof of life. The family begged. They were pleading with shadows, but they got nothing back. The cops are real clear on how this kind of thing works. You do not hand over a dime without knowing they are still breathing. It ain't about being stubborn. It is the only rule that matters. It is the only thing that keeps the talk going. In a kidnapping, proof of life is the only currency that actually counts for anything. It is what a kidnapper trades for the right to get paid. Without it, the Guthries' hands were tied. They could not move. Even if they had the money sitting right there, which they did, they told the whole world they were ready to pay. Harry Trombitus laid it out for Yahoo News. If those notes were the real deal, and if the family was ready to cough it up, and if the feds were in the loop, then that total lack of proof or any real talk to make the trade happen, it's wrong. It leaves you with two dark options. Either the people writing those notes simply could not show she was still alive, because they did not have a living person anymore, or they never actually had Nancy in their grip to begin with. Either way, the ransom theory falls apart. It was a dead end from the start. That wallet was always going to stay at 0. The guy on the porch had a backpack that was already stuffed full. He wasn't looking for a place to put stolen goods. He brought that heavy pack from wherever he crawled out of right to the front door of an 84-year-old woman's home. This went down at 2 in the morning. Kurt Dabb, a retired Pima County homicide detective who knew these streets like the back of his hand, told Parade that thieves do not show up to a job with a full pack. You don't bring luggage to a heist. This was a snatching. Former FBI agent Greg Rogers told Parade the same thing. He never bought the robbery angle for a single second. There were plenty of chances to hit that house when it was empty. Real pros spend time scouting a place out first. They look for the gaps when nobody is home. They do not show up at 2 a.m. while someone is tucked in bed. That ain't how a burglary goes down. That is how a kidnapping works. You show up because the target is right there. The person is the whole point. But that heavy backpack wasn't the most dangerous thing he had on him that night. He had been sniffing around that house before. Way before February 1st, that same masked ghost was caught on Nancy's lens. Her Google Nest camera caught him weeks earlier. He wasn't trying to get in, he was just There, standing at the door. He was just finding the camera and then vanishing. Cops call that reconnaissance. Bob Krieger, a retired SWAT commander, talking to Parade, pointed out a vacant house near Nancy's place that had been sitting empty before she vanished. He flagged that spot as a perfect staging area, a little base camp where someone could sit and watch her every move. They could track when Nancy left and when she came back, learning her whole life. It gave them a place to hide. They could be right there at any hour, Krieger noted. Journalist Brian Enton spent 40 days on the ground there. He picked up on something that everyone else seemed to miss. Even after 6 weeks in those hills, he still needed his GPS. He could not find Nancy's place without it. Those Catalina foothills are a maze at night, just silent, winding streets that lead nowhere. They snake through the desert with zero landmarks to guide you, but whoever walked up to that door in the dead of night, on February 1st, they moved through that dark desert without a second of doubt. They knew exactly where they were going. They knew exactly where they were headed because they'd been there before. That level of meticulous prep, those dry runs, that cold staging spot. The way they navigated those shadows and scoped out every camera lens, it doesn't point to some random snatch and grab for quick cash. This was a surgical operation on a specific target, cooked up over weeks and pulled off by a crew who knew their logistics. Dobb told Parade that he's convinced this whole operation took a team of 2 to 4 people to actually pull off. Pulling off something of this massive magnitude is just too much heavy lifting for one person to handle, in my professional opinion. Look at the facts. 2 to 4 shadows, weeks of careful prep, one specific target, and a plan that didn't leave much to chance. Plus, a backpack loaded with gear brought right to her door. Whatever the motive behind this was, it was not spontaneous. This wasn't bad luck. It was engineered. The people who built it knew exactly who they were hunting, and they knew why. There is one detail about Nancy Guthrie's place that folks ain't talking about enough, and it's heavy. That front security gate? News Nation reported back in March that the guys examining the house layout walked away with one very specific, very ugly conclusion. That gate at Nancy's front door? It was damn near impossible to crack from the outside. You just can't kick it in. There is no bypassing it from the street. For that masked figure caught on the porch camera to have actually reached Nancy through that gate and back out again. Well, someone on the inside had to turn the latch, or it was already standing open. That one hard fact of architecture birthed a theory that law enforcement sources eventually confirmed over at News Nation. It changes everything. The figure in the mask at the front door wasn't alone. There was a second person already waiting inside that house. The masked ghost at the door was just the visible part of the machine, the one piece of the puzzle the camera saw. The inside man stayed in the dark. This wasn't just some guy knocking on a door and shoving his way across the threshold. This was a coordinated, 2-point breach, with at least one killer already in position before the clock even started ticking. Think about the logistics. Slipping someone into Nancy's home before the nightmare began without alerting her family takes more than just luck. That takes a level of planning that goes way beyond some impulsive snatch and grab. It requires something far more intimate: access. It means someone lied their way in before that night, or they found a hole in the home's security Nancy never knew about. They scoped it out for weeks, found the weak spot, and exploited it in a way the cops still haven't fully explained. And that leaves us staring at a massive hollow question that the official investigation just hasn't seen fit to answer yet. If a stranger was already inside Nancy's sanctuary before that masked figure showed up on the porch, who the hell was it? How'd they get in? And how long were they sitting there in the quiet, waiting? They found blood at Nancy's place. They confirmed it was hers. Her blood was on the front door, staining the porch, and spattered across the driveway. The investigators didn't describe the scene as a massive physical brawl in the way you'd usually expect from a home invasion. No flipped furniture, no signs of a long, desperate fight. All the scene showed was her blood. Retired FBI agent Maureen O'Connell took a look at the evidence for News Nation and explained why that distinction is so damn important. She looked at what wasn't there: the voids. When someone walks through a blood pattern, their body breaks the spray and leaves gaps. Whether they're stepping or just moving, the body interrupts the flow and leaves these hollow spaces behind on the floor. We call those gaps voids. That's how the lab guys figure out if and exactly how a person moved through a crime scene. O'Connell didn't find any voids consistent with someone walking out. She flat out said, "I highly doubt that she walked out of there. The blood is heavy here, but the smear is huge. It's everywhere. You'd expect a void from a footstep here or there. Or from something right there. There just weren't any voids. which is why that mat out front was so vital to take. They had to take that mat because there weren't any voids to hide the truth. They were covering tracks from the jump. Her conclusion? Nancy was likely wrapped in something and carried out like cargo. She was hauled out of her own home. The lack of those voids tells another story too. If Nancy had been on her feet, if she'd walked out of that house, even with a knife to her throat or someone at her side, her movement would have left its mark in the blood. The way she stepped, her gait, the very physics of a human body moving through space leaves a forensic trail behind. But that trail ain't there. That means she wasn't standing. She was horizontal, or she was completely incapacitated, or both. O'Connell thinks she was bundled up and carried through that front door, the same door she couldn't have opened from the street. Past the blood on the porch, down the drive, and into the dark unknown of whatever came next. The silence is deafening. Andrew Bringwell, a former FBI agent now running a high-end security firm in New York, had already pieced together this operational picture. He built the map that O'Connell's forensics eventually backed up. When he sat down with Newsweek, he didn't hold back. Bringwell was certain the goal was a snatch, not a kill. If he wanted her dead, he'd have done it. That masked shadow at Nancy's door was packing heat. He had the weapon right there, but didn't pull the trigger. He used it to take her, but something went sideways between the plan and the cold, bloody reality. Even without knowing if he swiped anything, I'm betting the guy's whole intent was to kidnap Mrs. Guthrie. But the wheels fell off. Things got violent, and she was hurt bad, even if she wasn't dead yet. Then there's the line that says it all. He didn't think she'd fight, and when she did, he lashed out. For a woman in her condition, that kind of brutality leads to a dark end the kidnapper never planned for. An 84-year-old woman, slowed by back pain and a pacemaker, actually stood her ground and fought him. The whole scheme shattered at the point of contact. There was a jagged gap between the plan and what happened. The blood on the porch, the pacemaker flatlining at 2:28 in the morning, the silence was absolute. This is where that ransom story just falls apart. By the time those notes showed up, the damage was done. Look at the timeline. Nancy vanishes on the night of January 31st. Her heart's rhythm stops at 2:28. On February 1st, demands for Bitcoin start rolling in, full of threats and deadlines that didn't mean a thing. Those notes didn't cause the abduction, they followed it. Whatever happened in that house took 41 minutes. Between 1:47 and 2:28 that morning, the nightmare was over before a single note was ever typed, before a wallet was even ready. Savannah Guthrie told Today that most of those ransom notes were just cruel fakes. Just low-life bottom feeders trying to cash in on a tragedy. If those 2 notes they got were even real, I want to believe they were legit. A guy from California named Derek Calla got busted for sending fraudulent messages. He was just looking for a payday, totally disconnected from the crime. Detective Morgan Wright saw it coming. He called these messages what they are: parasites that crawl out of the woodwork whenever someone famous goes missing. They swamp the cops and eat up resources. They drown out the real evidence with useless, ugly noise. But even the notes Savannah thought might be the real deal, the ones she mentioned on Today, the ones the family actually answered, they didn't lead anywhere. No proof she was breathing, no talk, no deal. The family begged for a sign that Nancy was still alive. Nothing but silence came back across those deadlines. There was an unverified report on the Megyn Kelly show on March 28th that nobody seemed to want to confirm. Neither the FBI nor the Pima County Sheriff's Department would back it up, but it mentioned a second message. It wasn't a demand for money, it was an apology. A note saying Nancy's heart just gave out during captivity, claiming her health was way worse than they thought and she died. A cold comfort for a grieving family. Nobody's proven that report is real yet, but if there's even a grain of truth in it, it fits. It matches exactly what Bringwell said weeks before, a plan that broke the moment they laid hands on her. Actions that went way too far, leaving them with a body they couldn't trade and a debt they couldn't pay. Those notes either came from killers who knew they'd already failed, or from vultures who weren't even there. Either way, the mail wasn't the heart of this horror show. It was just a distraction from the truth. The real story stayed in that house, buried in the 41 minutes of terror before the sun ever rose. There's another part of this that isn't about the suspects, but about how the cops are playing their hand. They've been dropping hints that they've reached the same dark conclusion. When Sheriff Nano stepped up in February, and again in March, he hinted they knew why Nancy was targeted, but he kept his mouth shut tight. That kind of silence isn't accidental. Admitting you know the motive but refusing to name it is a power move. That ain't the behavior of a confused department, that's a team guarding the ammo they need for a trial. Former Fed Jennifer Coffindaffer asked the question out loud that everyone else was just whispering in the halls. Why did the Pima County Sheriff's Department tell the professionals to stay home and keep their help? They turned down the big dogs, the search teams that actually know how to comb through the desert dirt. Groups like EquiSearch and the United Cajun Navy, people who live for finding the lost in rough country. Morgan Wright said that's exactly what this case needs now, and they offered to do it for free, but the department just walked away. Coffindaffer had a theory about why they were keeping everyone at arm's length. Are the cops about to make a move? They know what went down with Nancy, so they ain't about to blow through the precious time and money of those search teams. It's a dark thought, but one worth chewing on. If the feds are working off an internal map that's already pivoted from a missing girl to a murder without a body, and if they've already got intel screaming that they ain't hunting for a living, breathing soul anymore but for hidden, cold remains, then calling in crews meant to find folks alive and shivering in the woods would be, from a cop's view, a waste of badges. It just wouldn't turn up the truth they're actually hunting for in the shadows. Plus, it'd tip their hand to the public before they're ready to admit what their internal theory has really turned into. Former FBI agent Steve Moore told Parade about the mental hell investigators go through on nightmares like this. You don't just walk away from cases like this. One of the hardest parts of being the guy on the clock is forcing your eyes shut to get some sleep. Then you're wide awake at 3 in the morning, asking yourself, why am I just sitting here? I gotta get back to it. Someone drew this up. Someone pulled the trigger. Somebody knows every single second of those 41 minutes. And when a crime is this cold and calculated, with people watching, partners in crime, and a paper trail of backpacks, it don't stay buried forever. So if this wasn't about a payday, what was it? On March 19th, 47 days into this living hell, Morgan Wright said the thing nobody wanted to hear. He spoke with the cold, sharp clarity of a man who'd spent 18 years in the trenches and couldn't stand watching the wrong story bury the truth. This wasn't a robbery that got messy. This was a hit, a targeted snatching that ended in blood. That simplifies the whole issue of the snatch. If they were only in there to grab jewelry or cash, you'd see real theft, real ransacking, not some staged theater piece. If the scene was faked, Brian, it's because the whole point of snatching someone is having a breathing person to trade. If she's dead, then you gotta treat it as a homicide without a body. Think about that. Wright isn't saying the money wasn't part of it. He's saying the money was just the tool, not the damn reason. You kidnap someone for power, for leverage. The way those monsters planned on cashing in that leverage was through a ransom call. But for that to work, the victim's heart's gotta be beating. Once that heart stops, once the girl doesn't survive the grab, the ransom plan goes out the window. Now you're looking at a targeted hit that went south. A no-body homicide, that's the legal term, and the FBI's own books say these almost always start out as just another missing person report. It's the mindset that tells the cops they aren't looking for a person lost in the dark. They're looking for the evidence of a crime where the biggest piece of proof is buried deep. In a no-body case, Wright said, you're hunting for hidden graves or shallow holes in the dirt. Things that when you're out hiking those hills, you gotta keep your eyes peeled for. That shift flips the script on how you search, where you dig, and what you tell the world to look for. Wright also nailed why the bastards, if they'd lost Nancy during the snatch, wouldn't have reached out again. He told front-page detectives that talking would have jacked up their legal nightmare, taking them straight from kidnapping to felony murder. The math for a killer who's already ended a life as cold as ice. Keeping quiet and staying hidden is a lot safer than talking to the cops. So, they go ghost. The bank account stays empty. The clocks run out. That proof of life that never showed? It wasn't some mind game. It was a physical impossibility. When Yahoo News pushed Harry Trombitis on what the real motive was, he didn't mince words. It could be some kind of payback, pure rage, or some twisted third reason we haven't even guessed yet. Payback, a personal grudge, something that started way before any ransom note, something that drove the hit whether they ever expected to see a dime or not. The level of planning here, the weeks of stalking, the inside line, and moving through total blackness that ain't some random criminal taking a chance. That's someone with a personal bone to pick with Nancy. Sheriff Nanos has told the public the feds think they know why Nancy's house was hit. He ain't saying more, but the fact that the law thinks they can answer the why. They don't think this was random or some freak accident. It points to the dark motive Wright and Thompson are talking about. Something personal, something targeted, something that lived in the shadows. long before the first ransom note was ever typed. If the goal wasn't cash, but something much older and more specific, then that ransom demand was never going to work. Not because the family wouldn't pay, but because the monsters in Nancy's home weren't there for the money. On March 23, 2026, 51 days after Nancy vanished, her kids posted to Instagram. They didn't say they were still out there searching. They didn't say they were waiting for the case to finally break. They said they wanted to celebrate her brave life, but they couldn't do it until she was in her final resting place. Not until she's found. Not until she comes home. Only when she is brought to a final resting place. That language. It's specific. It's intentional. In the middle of grief, people reach for the words that actually match where they are. Not where they want to appear. Not some hopeful show for the public, but the truth that hits at 3 a.m. The Guthrie kids chose the language of the end. Of laying down, of a chapter that's already been slammed shut, somewhere in a way the world hasn't confirmed yet. 3 days later, Savannah sat across from Hoda Kotb on Today. It was her first interview since her mother vanished. She talked about the morning it happened, the blood on the step. She talked about the Ring camera yanked from the wall, about waking up in the dark and picturing the nightmare that her mother went through. She said in the darkness, she imagines that terror and it's unthinkable, yet the thoughts remain. Then she described a moment of prayer, telling God she could handle anything except the agony of not knowing. She said whether her mom is still on this earth or in heaven, she knows where she is. She knows. There's a grammar to grief that folks use without realizing it. There's the grammar of hope active and looking forward. And there's the grammar of private knowledge, a peace that's already arrived, even when the facts haven't caught up yet. Savannah didn't say she hoped her mother was safe. She said she knew. That one word carries a massive weight. It's the weight of every FBI briefing and every secret the family's been told that the public ain't ready for. She knows. She just needs the world to know, too. She needs the physical proof, the location, and the name. She needs the arrest that would let her family do what they said. Celebrate and finally lay Nancy to rest. She announced she's heading back to Today on April 6th. She's calling it her only purpose right now. Savannah's been a face of morning TV for years. To step back into that cheerful world after this nightmare requires a kind of mental wall that most people could never build. She ain't doing it because she's moved on. She's doing it to stay visible, to keep Nancy's name in the national conversation. That is her strategy now. Keep talking, keep showing up, keep the pressure on whoever is out there holding on to a secret in the dark. 8 named cops, weeks of searching, and a pacemaker that went silent at 2:28 in the morning. A wallet that didn't collect a dime through 58 days of the whole world watching it gather dust. A family that stopped asking for their mother back and started asking to bring her home. This wasn't about money. It was about what happened before the first note was even written, in the 41 minutes between 1:47 and 2:28 a.m. That is where the truth of this case is buried. And the people who know exactly what happened in those 41 minutes are still out there, walking free. If you know a single thing about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. The FBI line is 1-800-CALL-FBI. The family is offering a $1 million reward. The FBI is offering $100,000 for her recovery or an arrest. Someone out there is carrying the truth. The only question is when they'll finally break. The clock is ticking, and the shadows are only getting longer. The silence in those 41 minutes is screaming for an answer that hasn't come yet. Every day that passes is another day the truth stays buried in the Arizona dirt. But secrets don't stay hidden forever. They rot until they're finally found. We're still waiting for the call that changes everything. For the moment, the lights finally turn on. The evidence is all there, waiting for the one person brave enough to say the name. Until then, the Guthrie family waits in the dark, looking for a piece they haven't found. Because someone knows. And we aren't stopping until the world knows too.